Hi friends, welcome to my first haunted tour. We are in the city of Whittier, Uptown Whittier to be exact. It's so beautiful here. I'm walking to the park. I have my water bottle and I'm looking for the park. Look how pretty. So we are meeting up here at Central Park on Washington and Bailey. And we gotta look for the Greenleaf, Mr. Greenleaf. There he is. There's folks over there. I'm excited. My first ghostly tour.
And what had happened was, this poor young lady was not from our town, and she moved out here to go to Whittier College, and she moved in a small apartment complex that is over by the Whitwood Mall. And like I said, not from our area, but this was her first time living by herself. Now, and as her parents helped her move in, she, after just couple of hours, they got everything where it needed to be, and they left. They closed the door, said goodbye, and as she sat down, she just had the feeling that she was alone, and it was a little spooky. So of course she got her phone out, and as she was kind of doom scrolling, as we oftentimes do, she heard some noises in the kitchen. And when I say noises, I mean literally like the pans were moving around, scraping against the kitchen countertop. And it used to be the women's club back in the 1930s, and love it. When I say things happen there, what I mean by that is sometimes lights will turn on by themselves. We've had the curtains pull back. So just be looking at the building. Every once in a while something happens. Now, I'm going to share with you my particular favorite story about this building. And this came to me from a woman who used to work there many years ago when it was the Red Cross. Red Cross closed in 2016, and it has been vacant ever since. Now, one of the things that people hear from that building are vintage music. 1920s, 1930s era, very soulful. So keep that in mind with what I'm about to tell you. This lady was in her office. She heard the music start to play. She knew the building was empty. So she made her way over to where the ballroom is. Now, as she was sitting there at the front of the doors were closed, but there was a little bit of light coming underneath the door. So she knew there had to be somebody in there that was responsible for that music. So she opened the door to walk in. Boy, was she surprised. The room was still dark, but there were two figures standing in the middle. There was a man in a World War II uniform, a woman in a beautiful ball gown, dancing together. Now, when she saw them, she said she felt like she was interrupting them, almost like it was inappropriate for her to see that. And as she stared at them, as they kind of twirled again and slowly faded from her view, as if they had never been present, the room became dark again. Now, who are they? Well, that's the part I can't tell you, but I can give you historical background.
Woo!
There they are. Back in World War II, they used to hold balls and parties for the servicemen as they shipped overseas. So we know we lost a lot of men here in Whittier. Go down the road to the Whittier City Hall. We have a memorial. You will see the names of many men that died in World War II on the beaches of Normandy, Anzio, Iwo Jima, a number of other very large battles. But this is where they would say goodbye. So what I think happened was that man went overseas and he did not return. And this is where they are still together. A bit about LOLO witches. And if you watch that movie, there's a very funny scene. They're a little confused about our modern traditions of Halloween, right? They're walking down the road, and who do they run into on Halloween night? Well, they see children, but they also got dressed up like what? The devil, right? They say master. That's the devil's house right there. That is where that scene was filmed. All of these movies are in Hocus Pocus. aren't movies. All these houses are in Hocus Pocus. But that scene, when they are invited inside the house, it was filmed inside the White Emerson place that is right over there. Back in the 1890 one, Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. That house is on Painter. Also, the most recent one. Does anybody know what the most recent one is?
The Steven Spielberg
Biopic.
Oh, yeah.
The Fableman.
Yeah.
Still here here as well. Hope you guys will check those out. All right, we're gonna head this way. And she believed that all children, no matter who they were, no matter how much money they have, she felt they should all get an education. And she is still very much active in this house. Owns it. When he moved in, he was sitting there watching TV and he got a feeling that he was being watched. He turned around.
He's looking. He's saying hi.
Yeah. And he turned around and there she was standing on the staircase. She winked at him and then disappeared. He realized he had a problem, that she was there. He says she's not a malevolent presence by any means, but she just likes him to know that she's there. All right, let's keep walking.
So we are covered in rain. It's pouring, there's thunder, there's lightning. He's taking us back to the restaurant. He said he'll continue the tour inside the restaurant. And we are not mad at all. My feet are soaking wet. My pants, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. But I'm having fun.
Actually a really interesting story that I recently uncovered. It's not one that's part of this tour, but I thought since you guys missed out on some stuff with the heavy rain, which doesn't look like it's raining that hard now, so figure, I would share this with you. Do I have anybody here that is from the Grove? Anybody here that lives in the Grove? Has anybody here been to the Grove? Okay. So what did the Grove used to be? It was used to be Fred C. Nellis, so it actually was a juvenile prison. And I'll give you guys a little bit of background with the story of that prison. Back in 1890, when our town was growing, believe it or not, California had a real estate bust. Can you imagine that nowadays? People were actually abandoning their property. People were leaving for the East Coast. In the town, Whittier had only been around for like a couple of years, and the city fathers were getting really worried because they realized it wasn't going to be long until everybody was gone. And they needed to come in, they needed to do something, so they talked to the state, and they said, well, we're actually looking for somewhere to build a juvenile prison. And so our city council said, hey, bring it to Whittier. And so they did. They built it in 1890. And why is that a big deal? Because if it hadn't been for Fred C. Nellis, our town wouldn't have survived. So it really was a big deal. And anybody that grew up in this area, when we would drive down Whittier Boulevard, we would all see the prison. My grandmother used to threaten to send me there all the time. Did anybody here have that experience?
Yes.
That was a common threat in Whittier. If you were bad, sometimes even the teachers would say, "Oh, you're going to go to Fred C. Nellis." So we were afraid of the place. And with all the bad things that happened there over the years, and a lot of bad things did happen there, it stands to reason the place was haunted. The place they say is most haunted is the old chapel. They said if you stand over there, you would hear crying. Sometimes it was sounded like a little boy crying, sobbing. Sometimes it was a young lady. And one person I talked to, they actually heard it from some distance, and it was a woman just sobbing. And they said somebody's got to be in there. And so they came to the chapel, and it was all boarded up, and they were kind of shining their lights in. And they said in the front of the rectory where the cross was, they actually saw a figure of a girl, and she had her hands on her face, and she was kneeling, and they watched her, and then she just faded from their view as if she had never been there. And so obviously, so these people these are tormented spirits, and that building is still there. When they tore down Fred C. Nellis, that was one of the buildings that was saved. And today it is a recreation center. And I have been told that people that live in that area, sometimes they hear noises like crying coming from that building. Now, let me tell you a little bit about why there would be things like that happening. Some of the dark stories about Fred C. Nellis. Now, like I told you, this is something I recently uncovered. It's not well known, but this is documented. This happened. Back in 1939, there was a little boy by the name of Benny Morales. Now, I will tell you what we know about Benny. He came from a family of 8. He was one of the youngest. The parents, the depression was going on. They didn't have a lot of money. I think they tried to do the best they could, but Benny started getting into trouble. And one day here in his town, they caught him stealing a car. He was arrested. He was taken over to Fred C. Nellis. He was incarcerated. Now, Benny was an escape artist. He escaped from Fred C. Nellis several times, and they always caught him. He would come up in Uptown Whittier. He would try to hide out in this area, and the guards eventually would find him. And on the last time, I think this was the 3rd time he had escaped. The guards were so angry they threw him into solitary confinement. Now, their version of solitary confinement was a little bit different for young boys than it would have been for adults. Although he was in a cell by himself, there were a couple of other boys that were in the facility. And the story goes that the boys had spoken to him. They were able to pass notes to one another. They were talking. Everybody said that Benny was in good spirits. The superintendent came in at 9 o'clock, checked on Benny. He was asleep. His hands were above the covers. He seemed to be comfortable. Well, not for long. The next morning, there had been a change of guards. A new guard came in and yelled a number of times for Benny to get up. He did not. So they unlocked the door, and unfortunately, from his belt. Now, this is the weird part. He shouldn't have had a belt. When he was put into solitary confinement, the policy was followed that day. All of their clothes were taken from them. They were put into a hospital gown. The guards the night before said that the procedure had been followed. But why did he have a belt? Well, let's fast forward. They very quickly did an autopsy, and they very quickly buried the body. The superintendent said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here." But the family was like, "No, this does not make sense. Something happened." because the other boys said, no, don't believe it. He wasn't suicidal. There was nothing wrong with him. So the family demanded that the body be dug up, which they did. They looked at it. There were different agreements on what had actually happened. But finally, after some interrogation, one of the boys talked. And this is where it gets a bit dark. Benny had been escaping the prison for a reason. And I will let you use your imagination, but the guards, some of the guards had been abusing the boys in the worst possible way.
Oh, man.
This particular boy said when he was sitting there in solitary confinement, him and Benny had been talking. They had been actually passing notes back to one another. And Benny had said, something has been very bad has been happening. And he didn't want to go into detail probably, but he said the guards had threatened him and said, we know how to really hurt you. Now a few hours after that, a guard came in to the area and gave each one of the boys, there were 3 boys, gave each one of them their belts. The boy that talked, he couldn't figure out why. Why would I need my belt back? You're in a hospital now. Didn't give the clothes, just the belt. And so, long story short, there was a big investigation. The superintendent was fired. There was a lot of kind of a magnifying glass was put on Fred C. Nellis. It caused them to do a lot of changes because of what had happened. But at the end of the day, nobody was ever prosecuted. They could never catch whoever did it or whoever had been abusing them. And at the end of the day, he is mostly forgotten. But when I tell this story and I hear about the sobbing, the crying that is heard in that old chapel, suddenly it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So a couple of people have died inside the Matterhorn. The most famous one is Dolly. What happened to her is, and I knew the person who found her body. So the story I'm going to tell you is, it's coming firsthand. The guy, his name was Ernie Burns. Ernie started working, he's dead now, but he started working at the Magic Kingdom back in the 1960s. So he was a very interesting person to talk to. He knew everything about Disneyland. And what had happened was, they don't completely know, but Dolly got on the ride with her kids. They think what happened was that her kids took their seatbelts off, and she stood up trying to get them buckled back in. But it was at a point where it was tipping down, and her head caught on the rock work. So she was flung out of the vehicle. They think that when she hit the ground, she was probably still alive. It was a subsequent vehicle that rolled over her. And this was what Ernie was working that day. And so they didn't realize what had happened. They just knew that the ride broke down. So he goes up there to the point where her body was. And this is what he described it to me. He said it was like the Wicked Witch, the Wizard of Oz. He said that her body was completely under the vehicle and her feet were sticking out. Ever since then, she's been in that area. The people that work there, that they have to walk the track at night. They said that they get a feeling that they're not alone. I talked to people that say that they have even seen a woman standing there and then she's gone. Some people say they've been touched. It's a forever presence that's there, and anybody that works the Matterhorn knows about Dolly. She's not the only one. Mark Maple is the other one. And Mark, apparently his friend, and this is just a sad story, the day before he went with his friends, they had dared him to stand up on the Matterhorn, which he did. He was thrown out, and his head was bashed against the rocks. And so he is the other spirit that is seen with some frequency inside the Matterhorn. Usually it's just touching. They know the area where he died, and they just feel like he either grabbed their shoulders. One person told me that they actually saw him. He was standing there, and they were confused, and then he was gone. So we think that both of them died in a pretty horrible way, and I think it kind of makes sense that they would stay there. Their presence would still be in their old age. So that is the story of Mark, Maple, and Dolly, who are still haunting the Matterhorn all these years later. The Haunted Mansion is interesting because I think there's a lot of reasons for it to be haunted. Back when they were building it, Lily and Disney had acquired antiques from all over Orange County, but also places throughout the United States. Anytime she was traveling with Walt, sometimes she would buy furniture that was of interest to her, and that was a lot of the stuff they put inside the Haunted Mansion. And so there's a belief among some people that when furniture or other items are very important to them, that sometimes the spirit will follow with them. And so, they have a lot of old furniture in the Haunted Mansion, so you have that. Also, you have the fact that somebody died in the elevators. There was another mechanic, he had a heart attack inside, it was found the next morning. We had, when I worked there, we had a policy called flip-flopping, and what that was is, so we could get more people in, we would open up the elevator up top, we would usher everybody inside, we would lower it down, hear the whole spiel, and then when the doors opened, we would run out to the other elevator and bring it up. And so, we're obviously in there as it's going up by ourselves. And a lot of people had issues being by themselves in those elevators. Just feeling like they were not by themselves. One person told me that they thought that there was, anytime they were by the old buttons, that there was just a presence there with them, just kind of watching them. And so we think it's the mechanic that died. The one thing that happened to me when I worked there, I hated being at the load area by myself late at night. If you've been there, and I'm sure most of you have, you know where the griffins stand before the ride goes up? When you get on the new buggy, there's these big old griffins. That's load 2, we call it. And so you'd stand there, and some nights you'd be in there completely by yourself, and there's not a lot of guests that are coming in. So you have a lot of time where you're just standing by yourself in the darkness. And I had heard people talk about getting grabbed. A lot of girls would say their dress would get tugged on. We wear tailcoats. Different people would say that the bottom of their tailcoat would get pulled really hard when they turn around and nobody's there. I was standing there one night, and it was probably about 11 o'clock. Nobody was coming through there. But that whole hour that I did by myself, I just was feeling odd. Like I felt like I wasn't alone. I felt very anxious, and I'm normally not like that, but I was just feeling strange. And suddenly my jacket got pulled hard, and it got pulled to the point that I thought I got stuck in the ride. And so I stepped out of the way. I'm like, what's going on here? And I turned around. There's nobody there. And I waited until the next person came to relieve me. And I said, were you in here? Did you grab my coat and run away or something? I said, even if you were joking with me, just tell me. And he said, no, I haven't been here all the time. I just got here now. Does anybody here remember the old bride in the attic? The old one that just had the beady red eyes?
Yes. Yep.
We were all sure that she was going to get up and kill us. Okay, have you noticed that how the bride has gotten less and less threatening over the years? Now she's just a projector and she's kind of cute. The old bride that they had there from the 60s had a wedding dress on. Does anybody here remember that? It wasn't cellophane, it was actually a wedding dress. Apparently, one of the Imagineers found a wedding dress that had belonged to a woman who was murdered on her wedding night. And you need to realize with Imagineers, especially when they're put into projects like that, a lot of times they take it really seriously. They want authentic stuff.
Oh my God.
Well, that concludes our adventure with Mr. Jacob. He was an amazing, amazing hostess, a ghost host, as he refers to himself. He told us he works at Knott's. He works at Knott's and Disneyland, or worked there, and all the interesting stories. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with us. So much fun. Oh my gosh, I did not want to go. I learned about Walter Knott when his wife Cordelia passed. He got a RV and he went ahead and parked it in Knott's Berry Farm, and he passed there. And Benny Morales, I'm gonna Google that. I want to find out about him because he was one of the people from Fritz Nels, which is now the Grove. And wow, this is such a beautiful city in Uptown. If you guys ever get the opportunity to hang out, I highly recommend it. I will leave the information down below so you too can take one of these tours. Thank you, Mr. Jacob, and you guys have a wonderful night. Bye! Thank you so much, friends, for clicking onto my channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you will subscribe, like, and share the video, and check out these two videos here. I hope you enjoy them and have a beautiful day. Bye bye!